welcome to another episode of Homeschool Moms Unfiltered. I'm your host, Amanda, and my lovely co-host is...
I'm Meagan.
So today's topic is, what the fuck did we do to kindergarten?
I am so excited for this.
Yeah, and if you didn't catch on yet, or this is your first episode, we do occasionally curse, so there you go. I think you probably picked that up with the title. But before we dive in, let's talk about the week. How's your week been, Meagan? Got a recap for us?
My week's been pretty good. I've got, it's busy, but like what else is new? One of my kids is flying home from Kansas today. I haven't seen her in 10 days, so I'm super excited. She's 15. She's been interning at a conference in Kansas for the last 10 days. Just living her best life. I mean, one night I waited up for her. I think I was chatting with Amanda that night, actually. And it was like 1:30 in the morning here and 1:30 in the morning here. So 12:30 in the morning. And she was answering my texts the whole time. And she was in the hotel. She was in the lobby. I knew who she was with. She was hanging out with other weaving nerds. But I was just like, oh my gosh, I cannot go to sleep until I know she's safely back in her room. I'm so tired. I want to go to bed. But this conference only happens every 2 years. And there's really not a lot of time for community of weavers to get together like this other than that. So she's had the time of her life. She's going to come home equal parts over the moon excited and beyond exhausted. So that's that. So she'll be home today. It's my kiddos. Yesterday was actually my kiddo's half birthday, but he plays Pokemon late on Tuesday nights. So we're having a half a cake tonight. And I finished a book this week and I'm a little bit unsure what to do with my life now. Do you have that happen sometimes when you finish a book, Amanda?
Yeah, or a series, especially. I really struggle when I finish a series and then I'm like at loose ends trying to find the next one. Yeah.
Yeah, I finished this book called Our Darkest Hour, and it was a story about this young woman in Italy during World War II. It was amazing. I loved it. I loved it. I loved it. And so then I have a whole to be read list, like so many people. So I just went and picked another title from there and I started it. I didn't even make it 10 minutes. I was driving and listening to it in the car. And I think the author must have been having some sort of competition with himself to see how many pretentious words he could use in a single sentence. And I was like, we're done here. Nope. So now I got to find a new book and I'm really sad about that. But I'll live. So how's your week going?
We're doing all right. We're still traveling. I don't know. The background isn't hugely different unless you see all the other stuff behind me. I'm in a different room once again this week. So just all the things that go along with that and not being in your normal home space. We were in Springfield last weekend. And so I kind of mentioned we were doing some stuff. We did some more museums and things and adventures and yeah, life's just a little crazy. I'm really looking forward to finding a day or two to just read. I have been so busy doing all these other things and handling and dealing with all of these other things in all these different areas of my life that I haven't actually had time to read a pleasure book in, I think since we were on the plane a couple weeks ago now. So I'll just need a day. I need a day.
Yes. I would love a day. Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah.
Yeah, I completely get that. Well, but I'm glad life is not too out of control, right? Just the normal busyness of life,
Yep.
Very good. Well, I am super pumped for our topic today, right? What the fuck did we do to kindergarten? And we have a lot to talk about. We have more notes today than we'll even get time to. So forgive us if we talk fast and throw things out. You might want a pen and paper or to re-listen multiple times because there's going to be a lot of information coming your way over the next however long this episode turns out to be. So in a 1998 survey of kindergarten teachers, 33% said kids should know how to read by the end of kindergarten. By 2010, that number had skyrocketed to 80%. I wouldn't even want to know what it looks like in 2024. With such a tremendous focus on literacy in kindergarten, what is being sacrificed to achieve these results? The answer, more than you probably realize. So you might be thinking, okay, but we're homeschoolers, so what does this have to do with us, right? We're not in the public school system. And the answer is a lot, because the public school system tends to be the quote unquote standard in the United States for what is expected, typical, and acceptable for education for everyone. And whether we know it or not, we're heavily influenced by what they're doing in our homeschool lives. So this push is often being felt far and wide in homeschool circles as well.
Yeah, it's true. And I mean, in some cases, you have kindergartners who are now having to take standardized tests. instead of having the chance to explore art and music and learn through play and hands-on science kind of projects. Fewer and fewer classrooms are doing the, hatch the butterflies and those kinds of fun things that they were doing in kindergarten. And so, how do we as homeschoolers resist being swept up in this tidal wave of pushing our 5-year-olds to meet these arbitrary expectations? So, we have mentioned many times before, but it bears repeating. We recognize the endless hard work and sacrifices that teachers pour into their students, right? We absolutely realize that they are under huge pressure from their administration and district to produce, and they're in essence caught up in this tidal wave as well, right? Like this is not a teachers are doing a bad job. The system is broken. That's a huge part of why we're not in the system in that way anymore. And so we just want to make sure that we put that out there.
For sure. We are 100% pro teacher and thinking more systemic change than individuals. Obviously, individuals can drive change, but it's not the core root of the issue is not the individual, it's the system itself. So, as I mentioned, we have a lot to talk about today. So I'm going to do our sponsor plug really quick because I'm excited to talk about kindergarten. So we want to thank our premier sponsor, Hub of Curiosity. They offer a wide range of secular and inclusive classes throughout school, everything from Lego math to filmmaking, incredible STEM classes. Our listeners get a coupon for $15 off their Hub of Curiosity class using the code of CURE115. OFCUR115. Whew, got it done quick. So let's dive in. All right, our first talking point for today is this 1950s report card that we'll post on our social channels and all of that if you want to scroll back and find it, or you can DM us at some point and we'll be happy to send it to you. But if you Google 1950s report card and look at the images, you'll have a variety of samples of report cards from the 1950s. This is Margaret Bramer, and her report card was issued on June 25th, 1954. I love that she's famous on the internet now. And some of the things that are written on her report card with just handwritten check marks next to them are: I know all the colors. I know my right hand, my address, my father's name, the days of the week, the 4 seasons. I can tell the difference between nickels, dimes, pennies, quarters, etc. I can read my name, write my name. I can tell a rhyme. I can listen nicely to stories. I can skip. What else? I can color. I can paint. Now you notice it doesn't say color well or color a Monet. It just says I can do these things. I can cut with scissors. I have experience cooking, which I think is like great. Sewing. And then as far as personal habits, that you can tie shoes, that you're polite, that you can take turns, that you eat nicely. And this is the entirety of what kindergartners were being graded on in the 1950s. There's one aspect on here too that I love because it just says on the report card, I can count to, and then the teacher hand wrote in the number that little Margaret could count to. And I loved that because it wasn't like they have to be able to count to 100, and if they can't, they're going to get an X or they're going to get a needs improvement or a deficiency mark there. It's just gauging how high Margaret can count. And if that answer was 22 or 79 or 155, the teacher would write it in. It's not being gauged against a standard. It's just a measurement. It's a checkpoint, which I absolutely loved. Had you seen this floating around the internet before, Amanda, before we started researching for this?
I have not looked at this one specifically. With the numbers, it makes me wonder because I know when I was in kindergarten back in 1985, well before, right, Common Core or No Child Left Behind, right? It was all decades before all of that. We had to know how to count to 100 at the end of kindergarten. And I remember that very clearly because you got a bottle of soda, you got a bottle of Coke once you actually hit 100. And that was like the big thing, right? Everyone waited to get their bottle of Coke that they got to drink in their kindergarten classroom, which would never fly these days, right? It would just never happen.
Michelle Obama is angrily shaking her fist at school nutrition.
Well, I mean, I can't imagine a teacher willingly being like, here, drink all of this caffeine, and then let's try to, yeah. And every one of the kids gets one on a different day. So every day you've got a different kid who's just absolutely destroying the classroom, right?
It'd be a great early indicator for ADHD, though. See which ones chill out after the Coke and which ones are ramped up.
Yeah.
Like, oh. Note that on the report card. Right?
Yeah. So yeah, I hadn't seen this, but I will say I do actually really like the fact that it's just yes or no. right? Like even in kindergarten, because we were in a standard school and we do technically get report cards. I don't actually really look at them, but we do technically get a report card from our oversight school. And, it's the needs improvement, like where they're expected to be, above standard. And at the beginning of the year, you can't be above standard on everything because
Oh,
that's not how report cards are allowed to be, right? They have to show improvement throughout the year. So it has to look bad in the beginning of the year so it can look good at the end of the year. And like all this kind of jazz and hoopla. And so I do like the fact that it's just like, hey, can you do this? Yes or no. It's not, well, it's not great. It needs improvement. It's just, yep, they're doing it,
yeah.
end of
I can
story.
skip. I get
Yep.
my credit for skipping. I'm good.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, if you compare that to the standards that our kindergartners are placed under now, oh my goodness, what a difference between then and now. And if we were seeing decades worth of progress and the fruits of the labor of pushing these 5-year-olds, I'd be like, oh, thank goodness we revised kindergarten. But as we'll talk about more in today's episode, that's actually not technically the case most of the time.
It'll be an interesting conversation. This is one of those things. I'm an academic homeschooler. Megan and I don't exactly see 100% eye to eye on all the things. So yeah, but let's talk about why some of this happened. Right, one of the biggest reasons for this shift is the 2001 policy of No Child Left Behind. Right, so No Child Left Behind, I will say it had good intentions, right?
Mhm.
The intentions were really to make sure that children in less economically advantaged neighborhoods and, just all kids got an equal and fair education and that resources were distributed in a way that they needed to be. So if you weren't doing well in certain subjects, it meant you needed more resources to help teach those subjects. And that is still true, right?
Mhm.
There are huge disparities between the classrooms that have all of the technology and the classrooms that don't have all the technology, the classrooms that can afford updated science books and the classrooms that can't afford an updated curriculum. And a lot of that comes down to socioeconomic factors. So it is still an issue. The problem with No Child Left Behind is that it tied your federal funding for school directly to standardized test scores. So, I mean, there are lots of issues with that, right? One of the biggest ones being teachers were really pushed to start teaching to the test to try to make sure that their kids did well so that they got more funding instead of it being if your kids don't do well, it means you need more money to pay for better resources. So the government is going to give you more money. It actually became reward system for doing well on the tests. And that was not not really the goal behind it, but how it ended up playing out. And so because of that, kids really pay the bill, right? The kids had to step up. They had to be the ones to do it. But you know, doing well on a standardized test, we all know this, it doesn't mean that you actually know the material well enough or that you learned what was really important. It means you know how to test. And
Mhm.
well, that's a skill that can be useful depending on what you're doing in life. That's um, arguably not the most important part of learning or education as a whole. Right? So we have some research here. Daniel Friedrich. I'm not positive. I'm terrible with names.
Me
Really
too.
should. This is like going to be the worst part of our podcast. Will always be the names. Like, I don't know. I'm so sorry. But he was an associate professor of curriculum at Columbia University's Teachers College, and he says no child is behind in kindergarten. And that's it, right? No matter where you stand on all of these things as far as education goes, I think we can all get behind the fact that kids in kindergarten aren't behind, right? They're in kindergarten to start their educational journey, right? Like it's not that they're not behind, right? They're just getting started. You can't be behind at the starting line. It just doesn't, it's not possible, right? Your kid is fine and they're better than fine. They're just getting started. They have their whole
Mhm.
life in front of them to learn. Like they're
Mhm.
fine. It's fine. It's okay.
Do you have in California, do they test kindergarten readiness? Do you know? Because that was a thing when we lived in Florida. My kids all took a kindergarten readiness test in preschool and then got assessed by the school also. Is that a thing in California? Do you know?
I think it is. We specifically did not do preschool because I am a real big believer in as little formal education as possible before they have to actually legally start formal education. So we were not in a preschool setting. And then when we did start kindergarten, and like I said, we started at a Montessori school because it was a private school. It was it was interview based because we're that she. Uh, so it was not what I remember doing. Right when I was starting school, I have these really little snippets of like having to climb over a bridge and do like these different things to show that I knew how to jump and climb stairs and do like these kind of fundamental things to start kindergarten. We didn't have anything like that. They just met with him and watched him interact and play on the playground, and they were like, he's awesome. And I was like, I know. I made him. They were like, would he like to come to school here? And I was like, well, I don't know yet. We got to talk about that because he's 5 and I let him make decisions that are important. And they were kind of like, okay, that sort of works with Montessori. So
That's what I was thinking. In the Montessori world, they'd probably be thrilled with that, you know?
yeah.
So it's so interesting that our starts and our results are so different, right? So because
Mhm.
I am as loosey goosey as it comes now, but my kids went to a hardcore top ranked preschool. So which I don't know if I've ever told you that before. You might be like, okay, then that does not track, right? So they went, I mean, it was like NIAC certified, 100% kindergarten readiness, like the best preschool in the town, the whole thing. I mean, it also happened to be the preschool at our synagogue. So it was like where I probably would have sent them to school anyway, regardless of that. But yeah, like hardcore preschool education. It was Club Med for preschool, don't get me wrong, right? Like it was, I mean, we lived in South Florida and they had snow day every year and they would bring in trucks and fill the playground with snow. Like you said, like interview bit. That was this education as well. I mean, it was ridiculous. It was an amazing experience for my kids. It was all play based. It was super hands on. It was super, emotionally supportive, all of that kind of stuff. But it was academic. It was like, you will be 100%, like they get almost guarantee basically like 100% kindergarten readiness score by the state. And so, yeah, my kids were tested at the age of 4 to determine if they were behind or not, even before they got to kindergarten, which is just, to your point, bananas. How can you be behind? You're 4, you're 5.
Yeah.
You can't be behind at 4 or 5. Like it's just bananas.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I totally get that. So, um, I pulled from an article I love. Now, don't come for me for the title of this article. I didn't write the article. The title's not mine. Okay. The title of the article is The Cruelty of U.S. Kindergarten Practices, and it was written by Peter Gray, who's an American psychology researcher and scholar. He's at Boston College, and he's the author of an introductory psychology textbook. He's known for his work in interaction between education and play, and for a really revolutionary perspective on psychology theory. So I didn't write the article. We will link it in our link tree on Instagram, or you can DM us for it. You can find it in our Facebook group that we run. But it's a really interesting read. So so here's an excerpt from a collective letter that was written by 27 kindergarten teachers in Brookline, Massachusetts. It says, we have dedicated our careers to teaching 5 and 6-year-olds, and we see that some current practices are leaving an everlasting negative impact on our students' social, emotional well-being. Therefore, we are here tonight to share with you our concerns about a new kind of gap that is emerging in Brookline kindergarten. It is a reality gap, a gap between the way research shows that young children learn best and the curriculum the district requires us to teach. It is a reality gap between Brookline educational values and what is actually happening in the classroom. So unfortunately now we are pushing developmentally inappropriate academic training on preschoolers. It's getting even younger because they have to be ready for kindergarten so they can meet these standards. And so the summary of the research in the book is very clear that the practices are just not, their children are less happy. They're having long-term effects on their aspects of their development, social, emotional, academic, behavioral, that we're burning kids out, making them hate school, making them hate learning, shaming them about their performance before they even start the part that's considered real school. And it's a really tough thing because again, that tends to trickle down into the homeschool world. I think part of it too is like we see things on social media, your play group mom friend that you've been with for 5 years since you both had your babies at the same time, and they're posting on social media, my kid is the star reader of the month at such and such elementary school, and you're like, my kid's not reading. And so even in the homeschool world, we're feeling this need to keep up with those standards so our kids don't fall behind. And so we'll link that article for you. The whole thing was a really interesting read, but that takeaway was like pretty big for me.
Yeah, and I'm going to say that the article kind of points to Common Core being the issue. And I personally am a huge proponent of Common Core. I think it is one of the least understood or most misunderstood ideas in education, especially currently. And we're going to actually I'm going to do some videos in the coming weeks and months breaking down some of these ideas and what they are, because it's hard. It's hard to figure out exactly what it is outside of all of the sound bites and the media crap and actually being able to like research all of the information and understand how it comes together and what it means. So keep an eye out for those, because I do agree that the way Common Core has been implemented in kindergarten isn't working, right? It's not working. I don't necessarily think that Common Core and kindergarten is bad, right? Because you can see in all of the other countries that are doing it so much better that they still have standards and their kids are still learning these same kinds of things for the most part. There might be a few differences, but the kids are learning to read. They just don't say that they're learning to read, but they're teaching them to read. They're teaching them to do numbers and to do writing and things like they're teaching all of those things. They just don't say it the same way and they're not teaching it the same way, and it's working significantly better. And
Mm-hmm.
again, a lot of that probably comes down to um, the fact that the US is still really struggling to figure out how to benchmark it and how to actually, we're so hung up on this idea that education now has to fit the corporate model of like, well, we need to be able to, chart our ROI and we need to be able to see that they've hit their benchmarks and how do we, like it doesn't, there are other countries that are tracking their educational gains in better ways and having much better educational gains because of it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, right. And so, to that point, in 2018, the American Academy of Pediatrics issued a report called The Power of Play. And in it, they stated play is not frivolous, it enhances brain structure and function and promotes executive function. And Peter Gray, in the article that Meagan was just talking about, he talks about that, about how children gain confidence from play. Play is so, so important, and it is being written out of all kinds of curriculum, right? And just society in general.
Yes.
We have a costume box. When I was growing up, we had a costume box. And a lot of that came down to the fact that my mom is a great seamstress. And so she made us a lot of great costumes to dress up in and play with. And I made sure that my kiddo had that from a young age. He still has it. He still pulls things out and does, lives in his imaginary world. And he and his dad will put on different costumes and enact different things. And, he's going into fifth grade. But I have worked hard to cultivate that and make sure he understands that that's okay. And the number of people that I see who are, like, well, my kid's starting school, it's time to clean out the room and get rid of the costume box. And it's like, no, 5 is too young to take away the costume box. Like it is more important than ever that you keep that at home. If your kid is going to be in a traditional public school where play is no longer valued and encouraged, like you really got to keep that, right? Don't get rid of the costume box.
I know, right? I mean, I have a 16-year-old who still has all his stuffies, and they have. I think we've talked about it before. They have full-on backstories and personal lives, and I mean, and he's 16. I mean, and their backstories are now age appropriate, so it's less fanciful, and sometimes it's more like Pepe's a bear, he's getting a job, and every day he gets fired from his job from a different reason, and he's always got these ridiculous jobs. Like, he's a professional napper. One time he went for a job interview to be the cat at the Chinese food restaurant whose arm just goes up and down, and I was like, well, if you're competing against actual cats, Pepe, that might be tough. But keeping that imaginative, so, oh my gosh, it's worth everything, and it makes life so much more fun too. I mean, we howl with laughter over some of the stuff that these animals come up with, which is really my 16-year-old's imagination. It's pretty awesome. So yeah, I totally get that. I love that. So and I know today's a lot of stats and but it's kind of like today had to be a stats and figures and reports kind of day, because otherwise it's just the two of us sitting here going, please don't force your 5-year-old to behave in ways that are developmentally inappropriate. And so we kind of needed to bring receipts today in order for this episode to work. So get ready for more. So in 2022, the UN's Human Development Index survey, which measures long and healthy life, knowledge, and decent standard of living, the US ranks 13th in education, which, out of 185 countries or however many there are. All right, 13 is not terrible, but given that the United States goes around saying that we're the best at everything, it's not also the best. What were you going to say?
I was saying, in World Reports data or something like that, we actually rank 125th in education. I mean, we're real like there. So, I mean, it depends on what all they're looking at,
Right.
but it's not nearly as shiny as what was that 12th that you or 13th.
13th, according to
So
the
yeah,
UN, yeah. But again, it
yeah,
depends on what they're factoring in there, right? So
yeah, yeah.
it
All
depends
of
on
the
what they're.
metrics, right? But yeah,
Yeah, I mean, this one is healthy life, knowledge, and decent standard of living. So there's plenty other things that you could throw in there that would really put the kibosh on that, I would think. So, like social emotional and safety in school and things like that too.
yeah.
Um,
That was there was. Uh, yeah, keep going. I'll get to it later. It'll be fine.
no worries. You're good. All right. So, which country? I mean, to me, that begs the question, who's in the top 10? Okay. Iceland, Germany, New Zealand, Norway, Denmark, Finland, Switzerland, UK, Slovenia, and Australia. So, for me, I would think to myself, okay, I don't want to replicate the system that's not ranking the highest. What are other people doing? Just because it's what we know in this country doesn't necessarily mean that that's what we need to do. So let's kick off with Germany. So what do they do in Germany? First of all, homeschooling is not allowed in Germany, so you wouldn't be homeschooling there anyway. However, the really interesting thing is we had a nanny years ago when my kids were smaller, because I worked full time, and having a nanny is cheaper than sending 3 kids to daycare in the US. And she was amazing. Her husband was in the military, and they ended up moving to Germany at one point to live there, but they weren't on base. If you're on base, you can homeschool. If you're not on base, your kid has to go to school. And she was devastated about that at first. Her kid was in kindergarten, which is a German word, ironically. Loved it. The kid loved it. She loved it. She was like, I never want to come back to the US. And then coming back to the US and having to put her kid in school here was devastating for her. But yeah, she loved it. So yes, they don't have homeschooling, but their public school system seems to be a bit more workable. So what does their public school look like? For kindergarten, it does not include direct reading and writing instruction. Instead, it focuses on helping kids understand themselves, develop empathy, think critically, and pursue their creativity. It's child led, where kids can learn from their curiosities. And I'm going to guess that as part of child led education, you're going to end up exploring reading and writing naturally without it being a direct level of instruction, because that's how it was for my kids. We would be going to the store and they'd say, can I make the list? And I still have one of the lists. It pops up in my Facebook memories every year. Oh my gosh, it was the cutest thing ever. If you saw how my kids spelled cucumber, it was like my favorite thing ever. But she got it all on paper and I loved it. They focus on social learning, making friends, communicating, working together to solve problems, sharing, and coping with frustration. The great irony is in the States, when you say you homeschool, people go, what about socialization? We don't focus in our school system on making friends, working together to solve problems, sharing. We don't focus on any of that stuff. So they're not actually learning that at school. And it includes a lot of outdoor time in all weather. Put your raincoat and your galoshes on, kids. Going outside. It's going to be
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, no, they have those one piece suits. It's, like so my kiddo was born in Belgium, which is just right next door to Germany. And um when he was born, the my doctor, my OBGYN was really like, you make sure you get outside with him. Kids need to be outside. It doesn't matter. He was born in January. And I was like, okay, well, what's too cold to take him out for a walk, And she was like, well, I wouldn't go out if it's less than 10 degrees Fahrenheit. And I was like, okay, like, all right, that's fine. And that thing, we had some friends with a little bit older kids, and they all had their little one-piece rain suits because it rains all the time in Belgium. That's true. And we got the cover that went on the stroller, and and umbrellas, and I got a big raincoat so I could zip it over the baby carrier, and we were just out all the time. And you do it, and then you hear in the States like, oh, well, it's raining, so the kids didn't have recess. Oh, it's this, so the kids didn't go outside. It was too cold, so the kids didn't go outside. I'm like, well, they would probably really benefit from getting outside. And, if we just planned a little better, I bet we
Yeah.
could make sure they got that outside time no
I'm
matter
seeing
what.
it even in the homeschool groups this summer. I mean, it's hotter than hell outside in the South, especially, but all over there have been horrible heat waves this summer. What do we do with the kids when it's too hot to go outside? And I'm like, I don't, what is too hot to go outside? I'm confused by that phrase, right? As long as they're hydrated and there's a source of water nearby to cool down, outside, go. My kids were all born in South Florida, and the summer there is brutal. They were outside the whole summer. I mean, they were like as dark as can be by the end of the summer because they were outside all the time. We were at, inlets. We'd go to the beach. We'd go to the pool. As long as there's water there that when you feel like you're about to burst into flames, you can dunk and you have hydration to drink, you're good. Go have some fun, right?
Like, generally speaking, if it's 10 degrees Fahrenheit to like 85 degrees Fahrenheit, like, you can throw your kids outside. They'll be okay. Colder than that, you need to take extra precautions. Hotter than that, you need to take extra precautions. We're realistic about this, and those extra precautions can cost more money. We're also realistic about that. But kids don't get outside nearly as much, especially in
Mm-mm.
school. And so that leads us into Finland, right? They do the same thing in Finland. There's a lot of that idea of the forest schools, and that's part of public school in a lot of places. It's super play based, lots of outdoor time. It's short. Their days are really short. They're only 3 or 4 hours long. We used to have that, right? And it got too expensive for parents. Now that we have more and more families that have dual incomes, and childcare is so expensive in the United States, we cannot have half day kindergarten. It's
Mm-mm.
very expensive. And, so that's changed, not necessarily in the best of ways. And that's a bigger systemic issue. We need to have care for kids that's fun and affordable, and it doesn't necessarily have to be more intense direct instruction like, well, like, we got to keep you, so we might as well make sure that you learn how to write in cursive in kindergarten. Like, I don't know, it doesn't need to be that way, right? So in Finland, it's also a team effort. They don't have just one teacher, and you see some schools trying to work on that, and it was especially more prevalent before the pandemic. And now we have such a teacher shortage that you don't
Oh,
have nearly as many schools that can have at least 2, 3, 4 teachers for a grade that are all working together and collaborative. But there they have a team of teachers, nurses, therapists, special education support, and they all focus on the overall well-being and development of the kiddos. And so that then therefore places a larger focus on physical, social, emotional, and cognitive skills, right? It's that idea of developing the whole person and not just the academic skills of the person starting in kindergarten. It seeks to instill a love of learning. We've talked about that before, the idea that, like, the teachers care about making sure the kids are passionate and enjoying what they're learning. And that has really gotten lost in the United States. And I think, there are a lot of things that play into that, but it's pretty universally understood that the testing that came with No Child Left Behind is hugely to blame for a lot of that loss of joy of learning, and the, like, you just have to know this to take this test, to pass this test kind of thing. And they're
Mm-hmm.
not doing that in Finland, because in Finland they have no homework or tests, especially the younger kids, but all the way up, right? And we've talked about that as well. Homework, there are plenty of studies, we could link tons of studies for you that show homework is not necessary, especially for elementary age and even middle schoolers. Homework is harmful, at and at best just unnecessary. And that's how they're doing it in Finland. And then they also have a strong focus on exploring and discussing emotions to build emotional intelligence, right? That EQ is so important, and it has to be developed and nurtured, and we don't do nearly enough of that. I know more and more public schools in the United States are trying to incorporate social emotional learning classes and time, but it's once again a special where they come in once a week, or it's a week long thing that they do, like a spirit week, but it's social emotional learning week. Like, that's not enough. You work on building intelligence all year long, and then you're like, okay, well, we got to make sure that we do 20 minutes a week of social emotional intelligence. Like, that's just not sufficient, right? Um, and the bottom line is, in Finland, they do well in all of the scores and the rankings, and a huge part of that is they focus, like I said, the passion, but also the joy of learning. And I
Mm-hmm.
mean, we understand that, right? That's one of the big reasons that we all try to homeschool, is to try to bring that joy and excitement and passion back into the process of actually learning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In Finland, it's really interesting too, because there's two different types of play. They have spontaneous play and guided play. So spontaneous play is, like Amanda said, they're outside. They're splashing around in a creek. And could you imagine the liability in the United States if you tried to let kindergartners splash around in a creek here? And the kids are like, "Hey, let's pick up sticks and decide to do X, Y, and Z with the sticks," right? And it's them coming together and kind of creating games and all that kind of stuff. But then they also have guided play-based games. So, if you're just sitting there thinking they literally just play all the time, and it's like, well, yeah, they're learning, but they're learning through play. So the teacher might set up an ice cream shop in the classroom, right? And the kids all take different roles, where somebody's buying an ice cream and somebody's charging for the ice cream, and money is exchanging, play money and things like that. So there's learning to be done, but it's through play. And so the
Yeah,
system looks very different.
no, exactly like the story you were telling. They in school may do let's pretend like we're going to go to the grocery store, and so they each write their list of what they want to get at the grocery store, and it's not spelled correctly because they've sounded it out, however they think. So they are learning their letters, and they are learning words, and, they are learning basic writing, but it's
It's not
just not
drilling,
boring. And
right?
again, it's not boring, it's not tedious, they're having fun, because what kid doesn't want to pretend like they're a grown up going to the store and they get to put whatever they want on their grocery list, right? Like,
Yeah. The interesting thing too, like you said, let's pretend we're going to the grocery store. In Germany, at least anyway, when our former nanny was living there, they would go places. She didn't even know they were going places. Right here, it's like permission slips and all this kind of stuff. Her kid would come home and be like, "Oh, I went here today. I went there today." They would just take them places within the community and let them do stuff. They had a workshop at school. Her kid was using a saw. Kid was like 5 years old. It's like, here's dangerous, sharp equipment. Totally fine. It's part of it's just a very big cultural difference. It's like if you look at playgrounds in Europe versus playgrounds here, and there's safeguards everywhere here, and we're a very litigious society. So part of that has unfortunately become necessary, but it's just so different there, right? All
mhm.
right. So if you're still with us and you're thinking, oh my gosh, this all sounds utopic, and yes, I would love to do this, but then my children will be behind, right? The age-old behind. So behind who, first of all, and behind what, right? These are standards that have mostly been set by, school boards and politicians, and not teachers, because the teachers don't love these standards either for the most part. So um, it's not being set by people who fully understand child development. Sebastian, speaking of names, Amanda, and butchering people's names, I'm going to go for it. Sebastian Sugit is a former PhD candidate at New Zealand's University of Otago. Studied two groups of children from different schools. One group learned to read at age 5 and one at age 7. And his results were that by the age of 11, both groups leveled off. So there was no advantage to early reading or pushing. I shouldn't say no advantage to early reading. If your kid naturally picks up reading, right? There's plenty of kids who do, and there's plenty of kids who seek out reading at an early age. I think more what we're talking about here is pushing reading at an early age. That there's no advantage. They're going to level out after a little bit of time anyway. And then Nancy Carlson Page from Lesley University offered similar findings in her studies as well. So there is no behind, right? Like Amanda said, you can't be behind at age 5. If you're behind at age 5, you're fucked for the rest of your life. I mean, really, where do you have to go if you're already behind at 5? You know?
Yeah, I mean that's it. You can't be behind at age 5. I mean, there are lots of things you can keep working on, but the fact that we would even label it as behind, because for whatever developmental reasons or whatever, you've not hit certain milestones. Again, you're not behind. That's one of those, it goes back to what we were doing with normal sucks, right? It's a pathologizing of differences. But in kindergarten, you can't be behind, right? You can't. It's the very beginning of things. It's fine. Now, I will say, so Meagan was talking about there is research that says, it doesn't really matter what age you learn to read, it all levels out. There is also research to say that if you haven't learned by the age of 11, you've got some pretty serious stuff going on. And statistically, your life is going to be much, much harder for you. So I will say, you don't have to learn to read at 4, and you don't have to learn to read at 6. You don't have to even learn to read at 8. But please, if you have a kiddo who is, at 9, 10 years old and they still haven't picked up reading, it's time to look at what else is going on and what you can do to help them, because there's a piece missing, and it's okay. But it's your job as a responsible parent to look into that and figure out what that missing piece is and help them achieve in that area.
Yeah.
And what achievement looks like is going to be different for each kid, especially if they've gotten to that point. But don't just leave them to flounder indefinitely. By 11, the stories they start telling themselves, and even just the information they have access to, it's really limiting. So let's make sure that kids are able to read at least a basic level by 11. There's my plug. Okay.
Yeah, no,
So.
I totally agree. I mean, yeah, undiagnosed learning differences, undiagnosed neurodivergence is nothing to be messed around with, right? It doesn't mean your kid is never going to it just needs, the support structure needs to be different, but you don't necessarily know what type of support structure to build if you don't know what the thing is, right? It's like
Yeah, that's
shooting
it.
in the dark. So
Yeah, just take the time to figure it out and know that it's okay for them to learn later. But if you leave it too long because you have this idea that, like, well, everyone will teach themselves to read before they graduate high school, like, that's not coming from someone who graduated from a high school with a lot of kids who graduated without being able to read beyond like a 3rd or 4th grade level. Like, that's not ideal, right? And especially as homeschoolers, we can do better, right? We see this in the public schools. We can do better, and there's no good reason for us not to. So, all right, I'll get off my soapbox there. So we have talked a lot about emotional, neurological, all of the different types of development, but we should also mention physical development. With reading often comes the push for writing, right? Once you start practicing reading, and in kindergarten especially, right, it's all about the tracing the numbers and tracing the letters and starting. I know in kindergarten, my kiddo had spelling lists that he was expected to learn each week and do spelling tests, right? But the reality is, so here's another one. We've got Ruth Wales, maybe. God, we have to be careful about these receipts we bring with all these names. It's like everyone's going to be Smith. You can only cite studies by people from Smith and Brown. Okay.
The data is accurate. The pronunciations we make, we claim no accuracy on.
Exactly. All right. So Ruth is a school improvement advisor from the UK, and she notes that children's hands undergo a transformation between the ages of 6 and 8, where physiologically the cartilage becomes bone, and pushing them to write earlier won't make that bone grow any faster. And it's kind of one of those things, it's silly to say, but sometimes you need to be reminded. Like their hands just don't work. They have a hard time tying their shoelaces. They have a hard time holding a pencil correctly. And you can drill it over and over and over. But if their bodies aren't physically there yet, their bodies aren't physically there yet. So it is what it is. Okay, so we will share all of these in our link tree. So we'll have some additional reading that we'll post to our blog, or at the very least, kind of in the notes section. And we are working on a blog. I'm not 100% positive when it'll be up, but at some point you'll be able to go find all of these things on there as well. So some additional things we've got. We have the Joyful Illiterate Kindergartners of Finland. We've got Is Kindergarten the New First Grade? Yes. And The Importance of Play. So some all really good things, right? Well, I'm in Missouri. Can you see my Missouri mug there? So if you're buying me a coffee this week, I'll try to find a local coffee shop for it. Now, our quick one-on-one coaching plug. Whether you're new to homeschooling or you're a seasoned pro entering a new phase of your journey, we are available for one-on-one coaching. So you can book time with one or both of us. We each have our own specialties, right? Pretty obviously, I'm happy to chat about curriculum, what different things mean and are, the California Charter School, gifted homeschooling. I can go on and on. I promise I'll try to keep it succinct if you're paying for my time. And Meagan is a great resource for all things unschooling. She is great at helping with transcripts. If that's something that you're thinking you need to do, you need some help with that. And she's also really good on early college and that kind of idea of, is my 16-year-old ready to start taking community college classes or to move directly into community college? And what does that look like for you? Meagan is perfect for talking to you about that. So there's a link in the description below and also on our Instagram bio. We have one of those linked trees and it's in there with everything else. So feel free to book a session with us. It's really easy. You can do it all online. You don't actually have to call us or anything. I'm so much better about booking things when I don't actually have to call someone. Like if I just click a button and I get like a confirmation email, I'm set.
Done. Especially like sometimes I don't settle in to do that stuff until I'm like doom scrolling on my phone at 1 a.m. and I'm kind of like, oh yeah, I forgot it. And then at that rate, it's too late to do it. So if I can do it online, I'm game. I can take care of anything, which I love. We'd also love to invite you to come and hang out with us in between episodes. We host a Facebook group, unsurprisingly called Homeschool Moms Unfiltered, where we chat homeschooling and life, but also just have some fun. So come join us. The more the merrier. Bring a friend. It's a lovely, secular, progressive community where homeschoolers can make some friends and have some fun. So come join us, Homeschool Moms Unfiltered.
Yeah, it's fun. It's that thing, right? Like we do talk education a lot, but then just earlier this week, our most popular thread was one of those predictive text, I am this, and so therefore I am this kind of thing. Like just we're good people. As long as you're good people and you're kind, come hang out with us. If you're not good people, go somewhere else. Yeah. Please and thank you.
Exactly. Well, it is time for a recommended resource this week, so let's check it out.
Recommended resources. Do you need more homeschool supplies? No. Are you going to want these anyway? Absolutely.
I feel like the talk of this is really big right now because it's the time of year where there's tax-free incentives and also Prime Day. And like every group is like, what should I buy? What should I buy? And I'm like, if you don't even need something and you're just looking for stuff to buy, you don't need more stuff, right? So today's recommended resource is pretty cool because it's not a tangible item, but rather a human resource, which is pretty awesome. So what do you have for us, Amanda?
That's it. It's not something else to put in your home. So thank goodness for that. I got sucked into Prime Day. I won't even pretend like I didn't. Okay, so in any event, I did mention previously that my kiddo had started a Hub of Curiosity class, and it is it's a disassembly club where they learn how to take things apart and figure out how they work, and they have a grown-up who actually knows what all of those pieces are and helps talk through. Like, so when my kiddo did it, he was like, there's this water inside, there's a yellow fluid, and what is it? And I was like, I do not know. You have someone on the screen, ask him. Like, he will be able to help. I don't know what don't get it on the table in case it's like something, maybe don't touch it with your fingers in case it's acid. I don't know. Like, this is also partly my parenting style. Like, I don't know, but be careful, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, but we also have insurance, so I suppose it'll be okay. Um, so I can talk about that and say that it's a great thing, but I can back myself up now because a homeschool mom friend has a kid in a different class taught by the same teacher. And she had shared some thoughts with us recently that we want to pass along. So here's her quote. I am thoroughly impressed by the quality of instruction and expertise offered. Sasha is truly an automotive expert who brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to every class. The classes are incredible and cover a lot of topics about advanced automotive technology. What sets Sasha apart is the ability to break down complex concepts into easy to understand lessons. Each class is engaging, informative, and filled with practical insights that are immediately applicable. So Sasha also teaches circuits and wiring, automotive classes. He's working on a soldering. Is that how you say it? Soldering? I don't know. Class.
Soldering. Why is
Soldering.
there an L in soldering?
Yeah,
I don't know.
that's I'm like,
When
I
did
thought
that?
maybe it was something different. Like, okay, so there we are. Maybe it's because I don't know any of these technical things. I'm going to put that out there. I know soldering, but I was like, oh, maybe it's something else. All right. So that'll be live soon. He offers gaming sessions for kids who love Formula One racing and stuff in that wheelhouse. Ha ha ha. And if you have a tinkering techie kid, he's also a stellar resource to satisfy their curiosity and answer their questions, right? So this is one of those things. I had kind of talked about it before and said that we were excited about it. My kiddo started it and he was really enjoying it. We're on a bit of a hiatus with it because we're traveling and it's a little hard to make sure we always can disassemble things in hotel rooms. Like, please don't take apart the hotel remote control. I can't promise that it goes back together properly, and then I don't know how we're going to pay for that. Like, but it's nice to have someone else say that they are also really enjoying the classes from Sasha, because that sort of adds it's not just me. So yeah, check it out.
I love that. That's so cool. I know my kids, I have tinkering, take it apart kind of kids, and wood shop kids and blacksmithing. My oldest son does wood shop and blacksmithing and all kinds of stuff. And it's tough when that's not your wheelhouse. Haha. Like, I have no idea, and then it's like if they have questions, or now he's to the point he's old enough that he's in Facebook groups and stuff like that. So he has resources to answer his questions. But when they're a little bit younger and they're coming to you like, how does this work? Or why does this do this? Or what is that? I'm like, I have no idea. And I'm so far in the I have no idea category that I don't even know what kind of question to put into Google to get the answer for you, right? Like, I'm not even in the hemisphere of being able to figure out what on earth you're talking about. So external resources, chef's kiss, love it. So we did it, Amanda. We managed to fit all of that research and data into a reasonably length episode.
Yeah.
Virtual high five for us,
go.
right?
Mm-hmm. All right. So do you have our mantra for us this week, Meagan?
I do. So it goes along with the theme of our topic this week, which is, our mantra is, the U.S. public school system is not the be-all and end-all. There are other ways, and I am free to explore them. Kindergarten fuckery be damned. So
yes.
When you feel the need to have your 5-year-old write an essay, just remember, kindergarten fuckery be damned. Yeah, exactly.
Please
that
don't.
Is not okay.
Let them dictate the most fun story they can come up with, and then have them draw the pictures to go along with it, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Make it fun.
Exactly. I love it. There's so many other ways. So if you're in that boat where your brain is really stuck on how to kindergarten without doing the school way, book time with us. We'd be happy to help you. And even though I'm a loosey-goosey homeschooler and Amanda's an aggressive academic, we still don't think, neither one of us thinks you should be drilling your 5-year-old into the ground with hardcore kindergarten. So
yeah,
that says something, right? I feel like that says a lot. All right. Well, have a wonderful rest of your day. We hope you'll join us for our book club episode later in the week. Our book on homeschooling and transcripts is phenomenal, and we'll catch you all next week. But in the meantime, happy homeschooling.
Yeah, have a great one.